Hi everyone, it's Linda from LindaZ in Arlington Heights. I don't know where my coffee cup is. It's ready to have a nice morning. I know we're looking around for it right now. I do have some water over there though. I hope you're having a good day. If not, it's evening. I hope you're having a fun evening, and just this little tips that are going to be the next step in finishing the baby quilt. I told you I would give you some very specific little tips on how to measure the quilt so you know how much binding to cut and how much binding to buy. So as you remember, if you watched my first quilt when I showed you how to cut the batting off of the quilt, I told you that on this particular one I'm doing a very fine binding. I only want 2 inches. I could do it a little bit more or a little bit less if I want, but I'm going to figure this out for 2 inches. So to do that, what do you think the first step would be? Take your tape measure or your cutting mat, because it's got all your measurements around, and you're going to measure both sides of the quilt, and not just, don't double it. Don't say, okay, this one is 38 inches on the bottom. Don't say, yeah, that's one's going to be 38 too, because it might not be. So what we're trying to get you to do is really measure your quilt exactly as it is. So I'm going to measure every single side. This side is 38. This side over here, actually the one at the top, even though this is supposed to be squared up, was actually a little bit over 38 inches. And then the side was 48 inches, and miraculously the other side was 48 inches too. So I came up with a total for my 4 sides of 172 inches. Now there's all kinds of little things you can go on the internet and find the method for, but you've got to have your exact measurements regardless. You still have to measure. And I thought it would be important for you to see how it's done. It's quite easy actually. So you measure all 4 sides, which this particular one is 172 inches. Then we're going to take that total, and what do you think we would divide it by? You're right, Bev. I can see somebody telling me. You would divide it by the width of the fabric that you're going to use for the binding. I am using this Kona very pale pink, and when I measure the width on this, it was actually 44 inches. So if it actually is 44 inches, you're going to divide that total by 44 inches. Now you'll figure out why in a minute. This isn't a math class, but it kind of is. That comes to 3.91, which is about 4. So that means I'm going to need 4 cuts across that Kona fabric. I'm going to need to make 4 strips. Now, the width of the strip depends upon what you want to do for your binding. Now, remember I said I'd like to have my binding be 2 inches. If you want yours less or more, you have to figure that in. But let's do mine. Mine is 2 inches, and then I'm going to multiply it by the 4 cuts. So 2 times 4, because I know I'm going to do 4 cuts, because I measured that when I did the division of the 172. So if you take that 2 inches and times the 4 cuts, what do you get? 8 inches. Right. It's about 8 inches. It might be a little more, so 1/4 yard would be important. I always cut a little bit more. Sometimes I go to 1/3 yard, and the reason I do for 12 inches is so that if I want to make my binding a little bit wider, I change my mind, I've got it there. So does that make sense to everybody? So you would buy for this particular quilt anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 yard. That's all you need for your binding. But again, you've got to measure your own quilt. So you measure all 4 sides, and I'll review it in a minute because I want to show you how to cut it now. Okay, let's do that. Now, you want to take your salvages. This is a fold here. You want to take those salvages up to there, and you want the fold facing you, right next to you. Then I like to have a little bit longer ruler. This is the longest one I have here, so I guess I'm going to just use it. Make sure, I've already cut this real nice and even to make sure it was right. And then I'm going to go over to this side because I do have 2 inches measured on here. And I'm going to square it up. I put my lines nice and even along the edge here. Then I take my square at the top and at the bottom. It can't be like this. Can you get that, Nick? So if it goes like this, I'll exaggerate it. What's going to happen? Your binding is not going to be even. So let me square that up again. I like to keep it a little bit off so I have a room to start here and here. And then I hold my finger here. Even though this has got a nice adhesive on the back, I still like to be able to do that. Go right through. Here's my first 2-inch cut. Now I'll go to one more. Again, make it nice and square. And you saw what I didn't do. No matter whenever you do this, you know, you're cutting like this, always close your rotary cutter. I should knock on wood here. I've never had a cut from myself from a rotary cutter, but I have seen customers that have. So I'm very cautious on and conscious about closing that rotary cutter when I'm finished. Okay, let's move it over to the next one. Again, I'm lining these up at the top and at the bottom so that I make sure that my nice and square. Now do you see how I close that so easily? And when you start cutting a whole bunch of strips like this, you want to make sure you really are doing that with your rotary cutter, because you could very easily cut yourself if you haven't closed it. Okay, there's my last one. That one I don't need. So I have 4 nice cuts here. I'm all set and ready to go. Now, you've seen my other videos, so you probably know that we're going to take and put these right sides together. So watch where it is. And we're going to just, you know, I'm going to make a whole bunch of strips first. I'll pin it. So angle to angle, trim it off. And then that binding will be perfectly even as it goes around. Here, let me show you. See how that works? Very, very simple. I'm sure you've seen that many times, and I do have it in a video, but let me just review real quickly the steps for you. I actually put it on an adding machine tape. That might be good for you too, because then you know that you've got your numbers accurate. So I measured all the way around the quilt, not just one side and then double it. You literally measure every single side. And on these 4 sides, it came to 172 inches. You're going to divide that total by the width of your fabric. Now, maybe your width is only 42 inches, or maybe it's 45 inches, or it's 46. You want to take whatever that width is that you need for your strips, and then divide it by the total. Take the total and divide it by the width of the fabric. That's your second step. The third one is you're going to decide what is the width of your binding. If it is going to be, say it's going to be 2.5 or 2 1/4, and you know that you need 4 cuts because I divided on this. If I know I'm going to do 2 1/4 and I'm going to times that, I'm going to multiply it times 4. So what am I going to get? I'm going to get 9 inches at this point, because I would have 4 cuts of each 2.5, or I'm going to actually get 2 1/4. So again, that will really give you a very clear amount of fabric that you would need to buy. Again, for this particular project, I bought a little bit over, I bought about a third of a yard. The 1/4 of a yard is going to make it to be exactly accurate. If you're a very accurate cutter, then that's fine. Okay, I hope that helps. I suppose I could print this out for you, but I think it's a real simple thing, and I think it's better for you to actually hand write it, because it will mean more. I found that over the years that it does seem to really get across when I literally have to figure it out. It's not hard. It's just 4 simple little steps. Thanks, everyone. I hope this has been a big help, and I have another step next week that I'm going to show you on the little cave machine that is going to show you some decorative stitches on the way to finish this off. Have a great week. Thanks, everyone.